Nobody noticed when Dara Osei stopped smiling. She had smiled through 3 hours of insults. She had smiled when General SYEH Raval called humanity a young and confused species. She had smiled when his soldiers lined the hallway of the Horizon Ring diplomatic station like they owned it. She had smiled because smiling was a weapon, and Dara had learned long ago that the most dangerous person in any room was the one who stayed calm while everyone else lost control. But now, sitting alone in the small quarters assigned to her delegation, she was not smiling. She was reading numbers. The colony on Briar had been home to 4,200 people. Farmers, teachers, engineers, families who had traveled to the Outer Rim to build something new. 3 months ago, the Dralith Dominion had swept in with warships, surrounded the planet, and taken every living person off the surface. No warning, no demands, just soldiers and transport ships and silence. The galaxy had barely reacted. The Dralith were powerful. Humanity was still new to the stars. Most species looked the other way and hoped the insectoid empire would leave them alone. But Earth did not look away. Earth sent Dara. Her team was small. Lieutenant Nico Abra handled security and intelligence. Femi Lawal was the best xenolinguist humanity had. Ruta Joshi was a combat medic who had seen too many broken bodies and broken promises. For people against an empire, it was almost funny. The first session was a waste, Nico said, leaning against the wall of their quarters. He was a tall man with steady hands and eyes that never stopped scanning. Raval doesn't respect us. He thinks this is a formality. Good, Dara said. Let him think that. Femi sat cross-legged on the floor, scrolling through a translation database on her tablet. She was young, barely 30, but she had a gift for languages that bordered on supernatural. She could hear lies in the spaces between words. Something is wrong with their numbers, Dara said quietly. The room went still. The manifest from Briar lists 4,200 colonists. Raval keeps talking about returning our people, but every time he gives a figure, it comes out to around 2,600. He never says the full number. Not once. Nico straightened. You think some of them are dead? I think some of them are missing. And I think he is hoping we are too stupid to count. Ruta looked up from her medical kit. She was a small woman with gray streaks in her dark hair and the kind of face that made people trust her instantly. I reviewed the medical files of the 31 colonists they returned last month as a goodwill gesture. Every single one of them was an adult, not one child. The silence in the room became heavier. Dara pulled up the Briar census on her tablet. She had memorized it on the flight here, but she wanted to see the numbers again. 2,614 adults, 487 elderly, 1,099 children under the age of 14. The youngest was 3 months old when the Dralith came. A baby girl named Ada, born to a schoolteacher and a water engineer. Where are the children? Ruta asked softly. Nobody answered. Femi broke the silence. I found something in the translation files. The Dralith word Raval used today, when he said the colonists were being processed, it does not have one meaning. It has two. She held up her tablet. The first meaning is cataloged, sorted, and recorded. The second meaning is separated, divided into groups and moved apart. Dara closed her eyes. She let the information settle into her bones. She had spent 20 years in diplomatic service. She had negotiated with warlords and dictators and species that ate their enemies alive. She knew the shape of a lie. She knew what it looked like when someone was hiding something so terrible they could not even say it out loud. He separated them, Dara said. He took the children somewhere else. We need proof, Nico said. We will get proof. But first, I want him alive. I want him to sit in that chamber in front of every galactic observer and tell me that everyone is fine. I want it on record. Nico studied her face. He had served with Dara for 6 years. He had seen her talk down armed rebels and face assassination attempts without flinching. But he had never seen her look like this. There was something in her eyes that was older than anger. It was the look of a woman who had just realized exactly what kind of monster she was sitting across from. What is the plan? He asked. Tomorrow, I asked for the full manifest. Names, ages, locations. He will refuse or he will lie. Either way, he gives us something to work with. Femi, I need you to watch every member of their delegation. Body language, micro-expressions, anything. Ruta, compile everything you have on the returned colonists. I want medical proof that not one child has come back. She stood up and walked to the small window. Outside, the dead star at the center of the horizon ring system glowed faintly. A corpse of light holding a station full of diplomats and soldiers and secrets. Let him talk, Dara said quietly. Let him tell us everyone is safe. And then we pull the ground out from under him. Femi looked at her tablet one more time. The second meaning of the Draelith word blinked on the screen like a warning. Separated. Somewhere out there, over 1,000 children were waiting for someone to come find them. And Dara Ose was not going to leave this station until she did. The negotiation chamber smelled like recycled air and fear. Dara noticed at the moment she walked in. Not her fear. Theirs. The Draelith delegation sat in their curved seats like statues carved from black stone, their compound eyes reflecting the cold light of the chamber. But their antennae twitched. Dara had studied Draelith body language for weeks before this mission, and twitching antennae meant stress. Something had changed overnight. Good. Let them sweat. General Reval sat at the center of his delegation, towering over the others. He was old for a Draelith, his exoskeleton scarred and dulled with age, but his voice still carried the weight of someone who had crushed civilizations and slept well afterward. He looked at Dara the way a boot looks at an insect. She sat down across from him, folded her hands on the table, and began. General Reval, thank you for continuing these discussions. In the interest of moving things forward, I would like to request a complete manifest of all colonists currently in Draelith custody. Names, ages, family groupings, and current holding locations. Reval's mandibles clicked once. That is an internal administrative matter. We do not share logistical details with outside parties. Under the Accord of 12 Suns, which the Dominions signed 40 years ago, any detained civilian population must be individually accounted for upon request by the detaining power or a recognized diplomatic representative. Dara smiled. I am a recognized diplomatic representative. The Accord was designed for wartime. This is not war. Then what is it, General? Reval paused. The chamber was quiet. 6 galactic observer species watched through screens mounted along the walls. This was supposed to be a routine negotiation. Reval had expected the humans to beg for scraps and accept whatever he offered. He had not expected this woman to quote law at him. The colonists are being cared for, he said stiffly. They will be returned when administrative procedures are complete. I see no reason to produce documents that serve no purpose except to slow these talks. Dara tilted her head. I understand. Then perhaps you could simply confirm the total number? Our records indicate 4,200 colonists were present on Briar at the time of your arrival. That sounds approximately correct. And all 4,200 are currently in Draelith custody. Another click of his mandibles. Yes. Dara nodded slowly. She did not push further. She let the lies sit in the air like smoke and moved on to territorial boundaries, trade disruptions, and other matters that she did not care about at all. She talked for an hour about shipping lanes. She asked detailed questions about mineral rights. She was stalling, and Reval was too relieved to notice. Back in their quarters, Nico was waiting with news. Intelligence came through, he said, holding up a secure tablet. Deep cover operative inside Draelith space confirmed it. The transport ships from Briar split into 2 groups after leaving the system. One group went to the main detention facility on Draelith Prime. The other went somewhere else entirely. A different heading, a different destination. Do we know where? Not yet, but the operative is working on it. Ruta stepped forward. She had been quiet all day, working through medical data with the kind of focus that only came from trying very hard not to feel what the data was telling her. I finished the analysis, she said. Her voice was flat, controlled, the voice of a doctor delivering the worst news of someone's life. Of the 31 colonists returned to us, the youngest is 24 years old. The oldest is 71. The average age is 43. There is not a single person under 18 in the group. She put her tablet on the table and pushed it toward Dara. The colony had 1,099 children. Babies, toddlers, school children, teenagers. None of them have been returned. None of them have been mentioned. When the Drelith talk about the colonists, they talk about adults. Every time. The room was very still. Femi spoke quietly from the corner where she had been reviewing recordings of the day's session. I watched their delegation during the session. When you asked about the total number, 3 of Revol's aides reacted. Antennae went flat against their heads. That is a Drelith shame response. They know something is wrong. And one aide, the youngest one on the far left, he kept looking at the door, like he wanted to leave, like he could not stand being in that room. Dara absorbed all of it. Every fact, every detail, every small, terrible piece of a picture that was becoming clearer with every hour. He lied on record, she said. He confirmed 4,200 people. He knows the children are not with the adults. He lied, and we let him. Why not confront him now? Nico asked. Because a confrontation behind closed doors disappears. A confrontation in front of the entire galaxy does not. Dara looked at each of them in turn. Tomorrow, we open the session to full galactic broadcast. Every species, every system. I want the whole galaxy watching when I ask him again. Nico raised an eyebrow. He will not agree to that. He does not have to. The observer species can request an open broadcast under the Accord. I already spoke to the Fenori ambassador. She is filing the request tonight. 2 other species will support it by morning. Dara picked up Ruta's tablet and looked at the medical data one more time. 31 adults, 0 children. The numbers were clean and simple and horrifying. He thought we would not count, Dara whispered. He thought we would be so grateful to get anyone back that we would not notice who was missing. She set the tablet down. He was wrong. 12 billion people were watching. Dara knew this because Femi had told her just before they entered the chamber. The Fenori broadcast network had picked up the signal. Then the Halley networks followed. Then the Sorith. By the time the session began, every major galactic species with a screen and a connection was tuned in to the Horizon Ring diplomatic station. What had started as a quiet negotiation between a small human team and a Drelith general was now the most watched event in the sector. General Reval knew it too. He sat straighter than before. His guard stood closer. His mandibles did not click once. He was performing now, not just talking. He wanted the galaxy to see strength. He wanted the galaxy to see a Drelith leader who was calm, controlled, and above the petty complaints of a species that still measured its starfaring history in decades. Dara let him have the first 20 minutes. She discussed timelines for the colonist return. She asked about transportation logistics. She was polite, professional, and completely unremarkable. She wanted the audience to relax. She wanted Reval to relax. She wanted every single person watching to think that this was going to be boring. Then she changed the air in the room with 6 words. I would like to discuss the census. Reval's antennae twitched once. Just once. We addressed this yesterday, Commander. The colonists are accounted for. Of course. And I appreciate your confirmation that all 4,200 are in your custody. I simply want to walk through the details for the record, since we now have a galactic audience. Dara smiled warmly. For transparency, Reval could not refuse. Not with 12 billion people watching. To refuse would look like he had something to hide. So he nodded, a single sharp motion of his angular head. Dara opened her tablet and began reading. She did not rush. She spoke each number clearly, each category with precision. The Briar Colony census, conducted 8 days before the Drelith arrival, recorded the following population. 2,614 adults between the ages of 18 and 64. 487 adults over the age of 65. She paused, looked up, and 1,099 children under the age of 14. The chamber was silent. The youngest recorded resident was 3 months old, Dara continued. Her name is Ada. The oldest child was 13. His name is Quasi. Between them, there were 1,099 children. Babies, toddlers, boys and girls who went to school and played in the fields and had never seen a warship before yours arrived. Reval said nothing. General, can you confirm that these 1,099 children are included in the 4,200 colonists you told us are in your custody? The pause lasted 4 seconds. In diplomacy, 4 seconds is a lifetime. Dara, counted every one of them. The children are housed in a separate facility, Raval said carefully. This is standard Drelith procedure for detained populations. Young individuals are given specialized care in environments suited to their developmental needs. I see. And where is this separate facility? That is a security matter. Can you provide the names of the children currently held there? Administrative records are being compiled. Can you confirm that all 1,099 are alive and healthy? I have no reason to believe otherwise. Dara nodded slowly. She set down her tablet. She looked at Raval with an expression that was not angry, not sad, not aggressive. It was the expression of someone who had just heard exactly what she expected to hear and was now deciding how much of the truth to reveal. General, in the past 3 months, your government has returned 31 colonists as a gesture of goodwill. My medical officer has reviewed every one of them. She gestured toward Ruta, who sat still as stone at the edge of the table. Not a single child was among them. Not one. Murmurs rippled through the observer sections. Dara heard them, but did not look away from Raval. Furthermore, we have confirmed through independent sources that the transport ships leaving Briar split into 2 groups traveling in different directions. One group carried the adults to your primary detention facility. The other group carried an unconfirmed number of individuals to an unknown secondary location. Raval's aide, the young one Femi had noticed before, shifted in his seat. His antennae pressed flat against his skull. You told this chamber that all 4,200 colonists are accounted for, Doris said. But you cannot tell me where the children are. You cannot give me their names. You cannot confirm their health. And not one of them has been returned. She let the words hang in the air. 12 billion people heard the silence that followed. Raval spoke through clenched mandibles. You are making implications that are beneath this negotiation, Commander. The children are safe. The Drelith Dominion does not harm young beings. Then show them to us. That is not possible at this time. Why? Security protocols. Whose security, General? Yours or theirs? Raval stood. His full height was nearly 3 meters, and he used every centimeter of it. This session is over. Dara did not stand. She stayed seated, calm, looking up at the towering insectoid general with no fear on her face. The session may be over, she said quietly, but the questions are not. Raval turned and walked out. His delegation followed in rigid silence. The young aide was the last to leave. At the door, he paused for half a second and looked back at Dara. There was something in his compound eyes that she could not read. Then he was gone. Nico leaned close to Dara's ear. Intelligence just sent the final drop. The children are at a bioresearch station orbiting a frozen moon in the Kel system. The operative's last message says 3 words. He showed her the screen. They are testing them. Dara read it twice. Then she closed her eyes, and for 3 seconds, she was not a commander or a diplomat. She was just a human being sitting in a cold room very far from home, carrying the weight of 1,000 stolen children on her shoulders. She opened her eyes. Now we finish this. 3 species tried to stop the session from happening. The Drelith filed an emergency motion to suspend negotiations. They claimed Dara had compromised the diplomatic process by using the chamber as a stage for propaganda. They demanded a closed session, private, no cameras, no observers. The request was denied within an hour. The Fenori, the Halley, and the Sorith all voted to keep the broadcast open. 2 more species joined by morning. By the time the doors of the negotiation chamber opened for the 4th day, the audience had tripled. 36 billion people across 11 star systems were watching a small human woman walk into a room and sit down across from a general who commanded fleets large enough to burn worlds. Dara wore the same plain gray uniform she had worn every day. No myths, no declarations. She carried her tablet in one hand and nothing else. She looked like someone walking into a meeting about shipping schedules. General Raval had been ordered by his high command to attend. Dara knew this because Femi had intercepted a fragment of encrypted communication that morning. Raval had wanted to leave. He had wanted to shut down the station, pack his delegation onto their warship, and go home. His government had told him no. Leaving now would be an admission of guilt. He had to stay and deny everything S.O. He sat in his chair, rigid and towering, and waited for the human to speak. Dara took her time. She arranged her tablet on the table. She adjusted her chair. She looked at each of the galactic observer screens mounted along the walls, one by one, as if she were making eye contact with every person in the galaxy. Then she spoke. General Raval, I want to thank you for your patience over these past days. I know this process has been difficult. I know it is not what you expected when you agreed to these talks. Raval said nothing. I have just one question today, Dara said. Just one, and then we can discuss whatever you like. The chamber was absolutely silent. Not a shuffle, not a breath. Even the mechanical hum of the station seemed to fade. Dara looked directly at Raval. Not at his rank insignia, not at the guards behind him, at his eyes. You took their children, didn't you? The silence that followed was the loudest sound anyone in that room had ever heard. Raval did not answer. His mandibles parted slightly, then closed. His antennae went flat. Across the table, his aides sat frozen. The young aide from previous sessions stared at the table like a man standing at the edge of a cliff. Dara did not raise her voice. She did not lean forward. She stayed exactly where she was and continued speaking in the same calm, steady tone. On the day your ships arrived at Briar, the colony had 1,099 children. Infants who could not walk, toddlers who could not speak, children who were sitting in classrooms when your soldiers came through the doors. You separated them from their parents. You loaded them onto different transports. You sent the adults one direction and the children another. She paused. The adults went to your detention facility on Dralith Prime. The children went somewhere else. A bio-research station in the Kel system, orbiting a frozen moon. You moved over 1,000 children, some of them still nursing, across star systems without their families. And you did not tell anyone. Raval's voice came out lower than before. The children are being cared for. Dralith child development methods are different from human methods. Your species is projecting its emotional frameworks onto a situation you do not understand. You are right that I do not fully understand, Dara said. So help me understand. Why were the children taken to a research station? What is being researched? Silence. Our intelligence indicates that the station is a biological research facility. That the children, born on a death world, show genetic resilience that is of interest to your scientists. That they have been subjected to bioscans, tissue sampling, and stress response testing. Raval's mandibles clicked hard. Those are baseless accusations. Then open the station to a neutral inspection. Today, right now, let a joint galactic team walk in and see the children. If they are safe and cared for, you will be proven right, and I will apologize to this chamber. Raval said nothing. You will not open the station, Doris said quietly, because you know what we will find. The observer screens flickered as species across the galaxy reacted. The Fenori ambassador was speaking rapidly into a communicator. The Halley representative had stood up. Even the Sorith, a species famous for their neutrality, were exchanging looks. You took babies from their mother's arms, Doris said. You took children from their beds. You moved them to a facility where they were studied like specimens. And you sat in this chamber day after day and told me that everyone was safe, that everyone was accounted for. She held up her tablet. On it was the Briar census. 1,099 names, ages, family connections. She turned it toward the cameras so that every person watching could see it. These are not numbers, General. These are children. They have names. They have parents who have not slept in 3 months because they do not know where their children are. And you knew. Every day you sat in that chair, you knew. Raval stood slowly. His full height filled the chamber. He looked down at Dara with something that might have been anger or might have been the first crack of something he had not felt in a very long time. You have no power to compel us, he said. Dara looked up at him. She did not stand. She did not need to. I don't need power, she said. I just needed everyone to hear you not deny it. The chamber erupted. It took 47 minutes for the First Empire to turn on the Dralith. The Fenori, who had traded with the Dominion for 2 centuries, froze every shared financial account before the session officially ended. The Halley recalled their ambassador from Dralith Prime. The Sorith, who had not taken a political side in over 100 years, issued a public statement calling the Dralith actions incompatible with civilized governance. Dara watched it all from a small screen in her quarters. She did not celebrate. There was nothing to celebrate yet. The children were still gone. Nico stood by the door with his arms crossed. Raval has been recalled. His government is sending a replacement. Someone called Overseer Paleth. I know the name, Femi said from her corner. Paleth is their senior crisis diplomat. She is calm, intelligent, and extremely good at making terrible things sound reasonable. They are sending their best liar. Then we need to be faster than her, Dara said. The next 24 hours were the longest of Dara's life. Overseer Paleth arrived on a civilian transport, not a warship. She was smaller than Raval, quieter, with smooth, dark kiting and antennae that moved like a musician's fingers. She spoke perfect galactic common and smiled with her mandibles in a way that almost looked warm. Dara hated her immediately. Not because she was rude, because she was good. Paleth opened their first meeting with an apology. She called the situation regrettable and said the Dominion was reviewing internal procedures. She offered to return the adult colonists within 30 days and promised that the children would follow in due course. In due course, Dara repeated. These things require careful logistics, Commander. The children are in specialized care. Moving them abruptly could cause harm. The harm was caused when they were taken. I will not negotiate a timeline for returning stolen children. I want a neutral inspection of the research station. Today, Paleth tilted her head. I understand your urgency, but an inspection requires authorization from our High Council, and that process takes time. How much time? Several weeks, perhaps. No. Paleth blinked. In Drelith body language, blinking was surprise. She had not expected the human to simply say no. Most species argued. Most species negotiated. Most species accepted that bureaucracy was a wall they could not climb. Dara was not most species. Let me be clear, Dara said. Every day those children spend in that facility is a day too many. I will not wait weeks. I will not wait days. If the Drelith Dominion does not agree to an immediate neutral inspection, I will go to the Galactic Assembly with everything I have and request a joint humanitarian intervention. Paleth's antennae went still. That would be an act of extraordinary escalation. Taking 1,000 children to a research lab was an act of extraordinary cruelty. I am simply responding in kind. Back in their quarters, the team worked through the night. Nico coordinated with Human Military Command. 12 rapid response ships had been quietly repositioned near the border of Drelith space. They were not there to fight. They were there to move fast if the children were being transferred or if the station tried to destroy evidence. Ruta contacted every galactic medical organization she could reach. She prepared emergency pediatric protocols for over 1,000 children who might have been subjected to procedures she could not yet identify. She worked with steady hands and wet eyes and did not stop for 6 hours. Femi decoded another fragment of Drelith communication. This one made everything clearer and worse. The bioresearch program had been studying human genetic adaptability. Humans were deathworlders, born on a planet with extreme gravity, violent weather, predators, and diseases that would kill most galactic species in days. Human children, still growing and developing, showed the highest levels of genetic resilience. The Drelith scientists believed they could isolate these traits and use them to enhance their own species. Dara read the report and set it down carefully, as if it might break. They are using children as test subjects, she said. Not full experimentation, Femi clarified. Scans, samples, stress tests. But the intent is clear. They want to understand why human bodies survive what other species cannot. And they chose children because children's biology is still developing. More data, more potential. Dara presented the evidence to the Galactic Assembly the next morning. She did not call for war. She did not threaten invasion. She called for a joint humanitarian mission to retrieve the children under galactic Law Point 5 species volunteered ships. Even the Finori, who had been Drelith allies for 2 centuries, offered to serve as mediators. The pressure was immense and growing. Trade routes were closing. Diplomatic channels were shutting down. The Drelith Dominion, which had built its power on fear and strength, was discovering that there was something stronger than both, that a galaxy that had decided to care. The Drelith High Command broke at the 48-hour mark. They agreed to a neutral inspection of the research station. Paleth delivered the message personally, her voice steady but her antennae pressed flat. "You may inspect the facility," she said. "Under escort." "Under neutral escort," Dara corrected. "Your soldiers stay outside." Paleth paused, then nodded. Dara stood and walked toward the door. Ruta caught her arm and pressed something into her hand. It was a small stuffed animal, a worn little dog with floppy ears and one missing eye. Ruta's voice cracked for the first time in days. "One of the mothers from Briar gave me this before we left Earth. She said her daughter cannot sleep without it. Her name is Ada. She is 6 months old now." Dara looked at the stuffed dog in her hand. It weighed almost nothing. It weighed everything. "I will give it to her myself," she said, and she walked out to bring the children home. The station orbited a frozen moon that had no name, only a number. Dara saw it through the shuttle window as they approached. It was smaller than she expected. A gray cylinder floating in the black. No markings, no flags, no sign that anything important was happening inside. It looked like a storage unit. Something you would forget about. Something you were meant to forget about. That was the point. The inspection shuttle carried Dara, Ruta, Femi, and Nico alongside representatives from the Fenori, Hallie, and Sorith. 7 people from 4 species, sent to open a door that the Drelith had wanted to keep closed forever. The docking clamps engaged with a low metallic groan. The airlock cycled, and then they were inside. The first thing Dara noticed was the silence. Research stations were usually noisy. Equipment humming, people talking, ventilation systems running at full power. This place was quiet in a way that made her skin crawl. It was the quiet of a place designed to keep its contents from being heard. That a Drelith administrator met them at the entrance. He was thin and nervous and would not make eye contact with anyone. He led them down a long white corridor without speaking. The lights were too bright. The air smelled like disinfectant and something else, something warm and human that did not belong in this sterile place. They turned a corner, and Dara saw the first room that IT was behind a glass wall. Inside, 12 children sat on the floor. They ranged in age from about 3 to 7 years old. They had no toys, no books, no color anywhere. Just a white room with white mats and a water dispenser mounted on the wall. The children were quiet. Not the quiet of sleeping or reading. The quiet of children who had learned that making noise did not bring anyone. Ruta made a sound beside her. It was barely a whisper, barely human. She pressed her hand against the glass and stood there, unable to move. Dara kept walking. Room after room. Dozens of them. Children sorted by age group, kept in sterile cells with automated feeding systems and monitoring equipment bolted to the walls. The older children, 10, 11, 12, sat in rows and stared at nothing. Some of them had marks on their arms where samples had been taken. Some of them had shaved patches on their heads where sensors had been attached. In one room, Dara found the youngest children. Babies and toddlers in automated care pods. No human touch, no voice, no warmth. Just machines that fed them and cleaned them and kept them alive without ever holding them. The Fenori representative stopped walking. She was a tall creature with silver fur and gentle eyes, and she stood in the middle of the corridor and could not go any further. "I have seen enough," she said. Her voice shook. "This is enough." The Hallie representative was already recording everything on a legal documentation device. His 4 hands moved in precise, mechanical motions, but his face was the face of someone watching a nightmare unfold in daylight. Dara found a room near the back of the station that was different from the others. It was a storage room. Inside, stacked in metal bins labeled with serial numbers, were the children's belongings. The things they had been carrying when the Drelith took them. Small backpacks, stuffed animals, drawings folded into pockets, family photographs and frames meant to sit on nightstands beside tiny beds. She opened one bin and found a pair of small shoes with stars painted on them. They were so small they fit in the palm of her hand. Dara held the shoes and closed her eyes. She stood there for 10 seconds. When she opened her eyes, they were clear and dry and absolutely certain. "Get every child out of this station," she said. Now, what followed was the largest emergency evacuation the sector had ever seen. Human medical ships jumped into the system within hours. Fenori transports provided additional capacity. Ruta led teams of doctors and nurses through the station, moving from room to room, picking up children and carrying them out. Some of the older children walked on their own. They moved slowly, blinking in the brighter lights of the shuttle bays, confused by the sudden presence of people who spoke their language and looked at them with something other than clinical interest. Some of them cried. Some of them could not cry at all. The babies were the hardest. Many of them had never been held by a person. They had spent their entire lives in automated pods. When human nurses picked them up, some screamed. Some went rigid. Some simply stared with wide, confused eyes at the faces above them, trying to understand what was happening. Dara supervised every transfer. She counted every child. She matched every name on the census to a living, breathing person being carried onto a shuttle. 1,097, 1,098, 1,099, all of them. Every single one that the reunification happened aboard the human medical carrier Hope of Briar, which had been renamed for this mission. Parents who had not seen their children in over 3 months were brought aboard in groups. The medical staff had tried to prepare them, but there was no way to prepare for this. A father dropped to his knees when his 8-year-old son walked through the door. The boy did not run to him. He walked slowly, carefully, as if he had forgotten how to move freely. Then his father reached out, and the boy collapsed into his arms and made a sound that was not crying and not screaming, but something older than both that a mother carried twins out of the nursery section. She had not seen them since they were 4 months old. They were 7 months now. She held them against her chest and rocked back and forth and whispered their names over and over, as if she could fill the 3 months of silence with her voice alone. Ruta found Ada. She was in one of the infant pods in the deepest part of the station. 6 months old now, bigger than her photos. Ruta picked her up carefully, tucked the worn stuffed dog with the missing eye into the curve of her arm, and carried her to the shuttle. When Ada's mother saw her daughter, she could not speak. She reached out with shaking hands and took the baby and held her so tightly that Ruta had to gently remind her to support the head. Ada looked up at her mother's face. Then she grabbed the stuffed dog, pressed it against her cheek, and closed her eyes. She fell asleep in her mother's arms for the first time in 3 months. The Galactic Assembly passed the Briar Resolution 11 days later. It declared the forced separation of children from any detained civilian population a crime under universal law. 14 species signed it. The Draelith Dominion signed it last, in silence, with no statement. General Reval was stripped of rank. He watched the broadcast of the children's return from a detention cell. He said nothing. Overseer Paleth resigned. Her final public statement was 4 words: "We should have refused." A galactic journalist asked Dara, months later, what had driven her. Why she had pushed so hard against an empire that could have destroyed her ship with a single order. Dara thought for a moment. Then she said, "Every species in this galaxy has something they would burn worlds to protect. For humans, it will always be our children. Not because we are stronger, not because we are smarter, but because we remember what it felt like to be small and afraid and waiting for someone to come." She paused. "We come. That is what we do. We come